Star Trek has the honor of being the best and most revered sci-fi franchise on TV, and it's back in a big way. Between Discovery and now Picard, it seems as though we're in the midst of a lovely little Trekkie resurgence, so what better time to look back at where it all began and count down our favourite episodes of the original series. Created by Gene Roddenberry in 1966, Star Trek endeared itself to a world enraptured by the space race and engulfed by the Cold War. It was revolutionary in so many respects and groundbreaking in so many more, establishing milestones, setting records, and doing it all by turning in engaging, entertaining episodes week after week after week. And while there are countless episodes to mention that help the series garner its cult status, there are a select few that stand out more than the others. So, with time traveling, Star Trekking, and furry critters galore, I'm Ewan, this is Trek Culture, and here are the 10 best episodes from Star Trek the original series. Number 10. The Enemy Within. The Enemy Within is a lot of things. Hilarious? Absolutely. Completely and utterly entertaining? Even more so. Famous for William Shatner's impeccably hammy "I'm Captain Kirk, I'm Captain Kirk, I'm Captain Kirk" routine, The Enemy Within exemplifies all there is to love about classic Trek. When a faulty transporter splits the Enterprise's captain into two halves, one good, one bad, its crew have to band together to make things right, with the added caveat that the evil half isn't as agreeable at the whole thing as his kinder, albeit less authoritative counterpart. Written by Richard Matheson and directed by Leo Penn, the fourth episode of the show's first season served as a fine indicator of what was to come in the series' immediate future. Evil Kirk roams around the Enterprise in a drunken, violent stupor until the good version and Spock track him down in the engine room, all while Sulu and other members of the Enterprise's crew are trapped in the worsening climate of a nearby planet, unable to beam up after the resulting battle on board the Enterprise. It's remarkably tense stuff, not just for the plight of the crew on the planet below, but for the zany duality of Shatner's performance. Number 9, it's Amok Time. Amok Time is all about Spock, and with Leonard Nimoy's character being the franchise's best, that means it'll be in everyone's good books. Released during the show's second season, Amok Time focuses on the Enterprise's first officer as he experiences the call of Pon farr, a Vulcan condition that occurs during their adult life. The catch? If Spock doesn't finish a tradition and marry a chosen suitor, then he'll die. Life or death stuff, then, for a crew member supposedly unperturbed by emotional duress. Like the aforementioned Enemy Within, Amok Time features an iconic Star Trek scene in which Kirk and Spock battle to the death to the tune of Gerald Fried's now iconic Second Troika composition. Like that episode though, Amok Time is a lot more than just that one sequence. It's a story all about Kirk and Spock's friendship, with the former disobeying Starfleet orders in order to save his friend and ally from certain death. Those classic, more bombastic elements of Trek are there for all to see in this episode, but the character-driven aspects of the show are what stand out the most. Nimoy and Shatner play off each other brilliantly, and DeForest Kelly's Bones is a fantastic presence as always. Number 8. The Trouble with Tribbles. Although the original series never lacked some cheap alien critters, Kurt's pet unicorn-wearing pooch comes to mind, the Tribbles do take the cake. The furry fellas in question jumped onto the scene in 1967 and have been one of Trek's most enduring creations ever since. They're the definite highlight of the episode in question, but Tribbles' true genius lies less in its use of the aliens and more in its approach to a burgeoning cosmic crisis. Focused on a territorial dispute between the Klingon Empire and the Federation, the episode divulges duplicity on both parties' behalf, adding the Tribbles in as another headache to the already fraught negotiations underway. It's emblematic of a sci-fi era where creatures themselves always look less than convincing, but as far as images go, they don't get any better than Kirk engulfed by a sea of abandoned wigs, which also happens to be my chosen form of death. Unleash the wigs! Number 7. Mirror Mirror. Star Trek Discovery might be a very different show to the one that premiered 50 years ago, but its use of classic Trek tropes is very commendable. The most recent one came in the first season's closing arc, featuring the return of the Mirror Dimension from the 10th episode of the original series' second season. Called Mirror Mirror, said episode revolves around the crew of the Enterprise encountering a parallel dimension populated by their evil doppelgangers. Kirk is a pirate leader, Spock, now sporting an evil guy beard, is his underling, and the rest of the evil crew don informal wear to hammer home their, well, evilness. It's classic Trek through and through, and by far one of the most entertaining episodes from the original series. There are darker elements to it, as there are with most episodes, but Mirror Mirror's story of parallel dimensions, beard-wearing Vulcans, and glittery sash-adorned space pirates is fun, plain and simple. Number 6. Arena. By now, even non-Trekkies will be aware of Arena. The notorious fight between Kirk and the Gorn is the stuff of legend, with subsequent parodies of the sequence almost always failing to outshine the sheer hilarity of the actual scene itself. Beaming down to a planet thought to have been colonized by the Federation upon the request of a Starfleet officer, it turns out that the colony in question has been destroyed, and that the invitation itself was all a ruse. Kirk, Spock, Bones, and a couple of unfortunate red shirts are all trapped on the planet, and the culprits in question are as cold-blooded as they come. The crux of the episode doesn't lie there, however, as it doesn't take long for the Metrons, a group of omnipotent beings, to get involved, beaming Kirk and his lizard counterpart to the planet below to fight to the death, using only what they can find. Kirk comes out on top thanks to his mad double-fisted chop thing, but it's his mercy that proves to be the episode's legacy. The Gorn and the Federation may come into conflict, but resolution is always at the forefront of Kirk's mind, with the captain reiterating Starfleet's use for exploratory and defensive, not offensive means to the Metrons at the end of the episode. It might have that corny fight scene, but at the end of the day, Arena is smarter than it's given credit for. Number 5. The Carbonite Maneuver. The Carbonite Maneuver was one of the first Trek episodes ever recorded, but it's no less effective in terms of its sticking power. Starting off with Spock at the con, the episode sees the crew of the Enterprise placed in an almost unwinnable scenario. Trapped by a ship commanded by the First Federation and subsequently deemed to be a threat, Kirk, Spock, and co find themselves at death's door. As far as premises go for an opening episode, they don't get much graver than that, but again, it's the strength of the Enterprise's characters that carries this episode through. Spock really comes into his own in this episode as a methodical and collected first officer, referring to the crew's situation as a checkmate scenario, while Kirk displays his prowess as a compassionate motivator even in the midst of death, going one step further when he countermands Spock's metaphor with an especially deadly game of poker with the Enterprise's would-be executors. Bluffing his way to victory, Kirk claims the Enterprise is hauling an undocumented quantity of Carbonite that will destroy the enemy vessel if the ship is destroyed. There's a twist that subverts the preceding acts of the episode in an equally interesting way, but Carbonite was best when Kirk and Spock were bouncing off together, formulating a relationship that would go on to define the genre in many ways. Number 4. The Doomsday Machine. As far as TV openings go, the Doomsday Machines has to be one of the most ominous out there. Investigating what appears to be a distress signal from the Enterprise's sister ship, the USS Constellation, Kirk orders his ship to warp to their last known coordinates and discovers the vessel floating in space, heavily damaged and with no means of communication. Following a quick investigation, it turns out that the Constellation had been tracking what can only be described as the precursor to the Death Star. It's been destroying planets left, right and center, and the Enterprise, though an equipped vessel, is clearly outgunned. What follows makes one of the most dramatic, intuitive, and tense Trek episodes of all time, as you see the Enterprise engage in a literal David versus Goliath encounter with a ship that's ended more lives than when Picard donned his sparkly speedos. I've seen it, now you can't unsee it. This is where Star Trek's bridge dynamic works best, with all the Enterprise crew rallying together to solve a problem on their own bridge in the arrival of Commodore Matt Decker, an unstable maverick determined to bring the Doomsday Machine down at any cost. It's just fantastic, and it typifies the strengths of the show's characters as much as it does the genius of Roddenberry's original concept. Number 3. Space Seed. Khan Noonien Singh may have gained a special place in the minds of Trekkies thanks to a stellar appearance in the second Star Trek film, but it was in Space Seed where Ricardo Montalban first endeared himself to fans. The story centers around the Enterprise uncovering a ship floating in deep space with a number of individuals stored in cryostasis. This is highly irregular.
Highly irregular. You talking about Khan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Khan!
This is good, like, insider footage.
Yeah.
Like, this would be good NDA. And these are 20 things you didn't know about Inception. There you go.
Commissioned during the 1990s, the ship belongs to one Khan Singh, a war criminal who took part in the eugenics wars that ravaged the Earth some 2 centuries earlier. His origins, however, go undetected for the vast majority of the episode, with the tyrant's deception only made clear in the final act. Perhaps the episode's best moment, however, occurs when the Enterprise finally discovers his true identity. Through a dialogue shared between Kirk, Spock, and Scotty, the story highlights how humanity has too often glorified despots and conquerors, with Scotty in particular having confessed to a tacit admiration for Khan himself. Spock, failing to see the logic in this approval, admonishes his comrades, and it's a theme integral to Seed's wider story. What follows would set up one of the most iconic sci-fi rivalries of all time, with Kirk consigning Khan to what he thought would be a century on an inhospitable planet. A reunion would take place some years later in what would become the greatest Star Trek film, but Space Seed was where it all began. Number 2. Balance of Terror. Balance of Terror is just a wonderful piece of television, and one of the all-time greatest Star Trek episodes too. Centered around a standoff between the Enterprise and a Romulan vessel on the edge of the neutral zone, Paul Schneider's episode drew direct inspiration from The Enemy Below, a wartime film that revolved around an encounter with a Navy battleship and a submarine lurking beneath the waves. It's a really tense affair, and while the Romulans have been beaten out by the Klingons in terms of capturing the public's imagination the most, there's no denying they featured in one of the original series' very best episodes. The true brilliance of the episode lies in the dynamic shared between Shatner's Kirk and Mark Lenard's Romulan commander. Two opponents pitted against each other, the juxtaposing scenes featuring both vessels are some of the series' absolute best, with both officers navigating a situation neither truly wishes to be in. The episode was more than just a tense and dramatic affair though. Interwoven throughout is a subplot featuring one Lieutenant Styles overcoming his own prejudices against the Romulans and, by extension, Vulcans too. It's a fantastic piece of television, and an episode often cited by Trekkies as being one of, if not the greatest Star Trek episode of all time. And number 1, City on the Edge of Forever. The 60s might have had one time-traveling sci-fi series in Doctor Who, but Star Trek perfected the formula in the City of the Edge of Forever. Focusing on the Enterprise as it encounters a temporal anomaly, Kirk, Spock, and the drugged Leonard McCoy travel back to 30s-era America, where the latter unknowingly erases the Enterprise from existence. The best thing about the episode, though, lies in how it ties to the past, present, and future altogether. The setting of Depression-era New York is no coincidence, and the Enterprise crew's arrival is thematically tied to the concept of Trek itself. Back then, and even today, Star Trek's future has always felt like a distant reality, not just technologically speaking either. I mean, quite the opposite, seeing as how much tech Trek's preempted, but societally speaking as well. Of course, Trek's future isn't a utopia, but bigotry is admonished from top to bottom. People of all faiths, races, religions, genders, and sexes all serve together, live together, and explore together. Money isn't spent on war and death, but on life instead. That's what the City on the Edge of Forever is all about. Humanity's potential to strive for something better, and a reminder for us all to make it so. You won't find a better advert for Star Trek than it. And that was our list on the 10 best Star Trek original series episodes. Let me know your favourites down in the comments below, and don't forget to check out Trek Culture if you haven't already. If you love Star Trek and want a dedicated hub for discussions on all facets of the franchise, it's a go-to place. Lastly, remember that you can find more articles like this at whatculture.com, and more of me on Twitter at YourRunesThings. That's all for now though, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Beam me out.
Can't do that, you.
What do you mean you can't pick me up? Beam me.
You know why.
Budget cuts, man. Jeez.